so made the grave a sign of hope and promises resurrection, even as it plays on mortal bodies. Grant that our brothers
Our microphones are turned up as high as they can go, but also the wind is wreaking havoc, a little bit of havoc.
are the resurrection and the life. And we will see you face to face, and in your face will see light. Oh, the splendor of God, where you live and reign forever and ever. Sure and certain hope, the resurrection and eternal life, of our Lord Jesus Christ. We commend to Almighty God our brother Greg, who commits his body to the earth. Earth to earth, earth to earth, is ash to ashes, dust to dust. Lord, bless him and keep him. Lord, make his face to shine upon him. Be gracious to him. Lord, lift up his countenance upon him. Give him peace. Friends, with longing for the coming of God's kingdom, let's offer the prayer Jesus taught us to say. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, merciful Lord, we come with the anguish of the sorrowful, of our senses and prayers of comfort. Hear your people who cry out to you in their need. Strengthen them in your lasting peace. We ask this in Christ our Lord. Eternal rest, grace, and may he rest in peace. And may his soul, the souls of all the faithful departed to the mercy of God, rest in peace.
That was the Reverend Benjamin Syberg from St. Patrick's Catholic Church overseeing the burial service.
Go to fire party. So they fired their 3 volleys, 21 gun salute. Now taps is being played. So they'll remain at present arms until taps is done. You see the officers, the pallbearers that did the escort in, had their hands on, they will come up and now do the flag fold. When they do the flag fold, the bagpipers will start Amazing Grace on the first fold.
Yep.
Now, Scott, they're doing two flags. You're pointing this out, two flags.
You know, so both flags have laid on top of Greg at some point in time. Obviously, you just saw this one, but the one before, during the initial transport and through the 4 other processions that took place, that flag, both of those flags have been on Greg at one point in time. That second flag that you see already pre-folded will go to one of the family members. I'm not sure, maybe to the twins, maybe one to the sister, or maybe one to the mom and dad. I'm not sure how that the family will have decided that already with the team's consultation. So I don't know. This will be a surprise to me as well.
So this is the officer in charge handing a flag off to Chief Sean King, who will then hand the flag off to family members. And you're absolutely right, Scott. What a heartbreaking scene here. 2 flags handed to both of Detective Greg Ferency's twins.
Yeah, typically it's only one flag that we would issue a family, but there's been cases, especially recently, and how do you say no to one and,
Sure.
and yes to the other? So that's, but notably, any flag presented to the family has been at rest with Greg.
And there is what you talked about.
So they'll go ahead and step off. That will be the cue for all the other officers to do. The chief will start off the laying of the carnation process, and then everybody will just follow suit.
And as you saw, the honor guard putting their hand on the casket one last time, and then their carnation with the red dot representing the bloodshed. And now this is when the officers and their spouses will proceed past the casket and they will put the carnation. This is very historic, very symbolic.
It is. So that is I know we talked about the last salute, which isn't the literal salute, but this is a piece of each officer and significant other is now going to be laid to rest with Greg. So yet again, there's something else for everyone, including the officers and spouses, that a piece of them is going to be with him as Greg leaves a piece of him with everybody else that's here as well.
The spouses or significant others laying a long-stemmed carnation. You'll see the officers will have a short stem. There's one officer right there. See how small that is there. They've had that in their lapel or been holding it. These are officers that are filing by the casket, placing a white carnation with a red drop. You can see that red drop. It's to represent blood lost or sacrificed for the community. And the white carnation represents a good life.
Good life, integrity, and purity. Raising our hand to swear we would do for others. That is the integrity and purity that's intended with the white carnation. And obviously, as you said, the red is for the blood shed or spilled or given on behalf of others.
There are hundreds of officers here, so I imagine that that is going to be a very large pile of carnations.
It will, but everyone will be buried with him.
Detective Greg Ferency will also be buried with his badges, not only his Terre Haute Police Department badge, but his FBI badge.
Yeah, and you noticed, I know it had been mentioned before, but you see the black mourning band. And that, again, when we talk about traditions and the things, this comes back centuries ago. If you remember, not just here, but in other countries, typically when somebody was mourning the loss of a loved one, they would wear a black mourning band around their arm. We just morphed that into, obviously, the badge covering, which now all the police and fire departments do as well when they lose an officer.
When we are seeing these men and women in regular suits, they are either FBI agents, ATF, things like that, right?
Yeah, and it could be, people from the prosecutor's office or other branches, other agencies as well. Maybe not. They could be like light duty personnel where they may not be able to wear a uniform by department policy, so they could be just wearing.
Or first responders in general.
Absolutely, and these typically here, obviously spouses, significant others, and kids of officers. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, every little thing that you saw there in the ceremony. I know it went kind of fast, but the significance of just the little things that, from your point that you made earlier, the tradition of things and how the tradition is still there. It will never go away, but how we interpret the tradition and things that we have done in the past. The 21 gun salute, that was originally to show the enemy, whoever the enemy may be, that we no longer intend harm. So on the battlefield, the intention was to be able to clear the dead without worrying about getting shot by your enemy. So both sides would agree by firing a series of volleys, saying, we're not going to shoot anymore, that's my signal to you, and vice versa. Then they would go and clear and bury their dead. Each side would be able to do that. So that's where that came from. The flag fold, it had 13 folds in it. There's significant meaning to each one of those. They're way too long to go into, but each one has about a paragraph meaning to each one. So there is significance of that. That has not changed. The salute, you saw that multiple times, and you'll see a final one here before long. And that it's a controversial. Medieval times where, if you remember the knights in shining armor on the horses, or where they would raise their masks, that's what some people will say it came from. Others will say it's a show against another person that you're crossing paths with, that you are unarmed and that you mean no harm, so you would show that your hand was open. So it could be one or a combination of both of those. Taps. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You had mentioned that Amazing Grace will be played on the very first fold of that flag ceremony. Is there a significance to why the first fold?
No, and they only play 2 verses of it, so that's another thing. Now, some people will say, no, this is why, and these are just one of those things that obviously Amazing Grace wasn't done in the 1800s or prior to, but they play 2 verses of it, and that is it's almost like a timing mechanism. And the Amazing Grace is just a phenomenal in and of itself. Sure. Hearing that on the bagpipes is equally as pungent, and not in a bad way, as Lieutenant Brian Wolf sang that version. So, but that's also a cue mechanism to know the flag fold detail to be in timing of how long it should take to do those 13 folds. Now, there are variances. I mean, there are gloves that get hung up and things like that. Things happen.
Sure.
But typically within that second verse of Amazing Grace, and that's just a huge impact song right there.
Yes, it brings chills every time I hear that song, but especially on the bagpipes.
Then you heard, you know, taps in there, and taps was originally for soldiers, lights out, put out the campfires, put out whatever other lights. So, and then it was supposed to be a truce at nighttime as well, so we wouldn't, meaning enemies would not combat each other during night. Everybody agreed that we would no lights and go to sleep, but just in case we'd have to put the campfires out. I'm generalizing back in, you know, the 1700s when that occurred. That's where that came from. Military still uses it every day, every night.
Sure. We saw lots of Terre Haute Police Department. There's some more officers. We're seeing state police officers.
Yeah, you'll see that they're doing a double file. That's what we call the double. You saw that in the beginning at the Holman Center. In order to get that amount of officers and others through, they'll do a double. So they're going to do on each side. Or they may, I hate to say bunny hop, but that's what it's called. We bunny hop, take turns doing the sides on there. So it all depends on how they have the cemetery set up.
And in the end, the officer in charge will place the final flower and give the final salute.
Yes, and he may or may not walk over and say something to the family. Sometimes that's the OIC's preference, whether he does or not, but he will be the last carnation and the final salute.
Then the pipes and drums band will play Going Home as they file out. Just that song alone certainly has great meaning in history.
It is, and that's, again, going back to many other places, but notably in New York, NYPD, and that was bought over by the Scottish and Irish immigrants. That's how that originated, and it just seemed to carry over. It's not just with police, but with fire department as well. And if you saw the bagpipers, there were I recognized some from Lake County. There were some fire department bagpipers in there as well. So it was a mix of at least two, if not three, different bagpipe teams.
Earlier in the procession, you saw the final 1042 was given, or you heard the final 1042 was given. The funeral coach stopped in front of the Terre Haute Police Department headquarters as 911 Director of Vigo County, Vicki Oster, gave the final call, calling for Unit 129 multiple times. That is the unit number of Detective Greg Ferency. Answering his final call, and as she said, there is no greater love than a man that would lay down his life for another. A clearly moved 911 director who was trying to get through that final call through sobs. Very, very difficult for her to do, difficult to listen to.
It is, and that, imagine having to deal with the call itself on the day that Greg was killed.
Can't
now
imagine.
You have to do it. You have to do this again. And that's a lot of pressure. And again, they'll never be able to call his badge number or his name again over the radio. And that's very, very difficult for people to deal with.
Well, and these are men and women who have dedicated, some of them their lives, but certainly several years, and they get to know each other so well. That procession alone was certainly a moving sight as members of the Terre Haute community came out to give their condolences, to show their support to not only Detective Greg Ferency, but to the entire Terre Haute Police Department. We do have drone footage of the procession. What a neat view of that. You see the funeral coach right there that is flanked by motorcycles that is turning onto Wabash Avenue, heading down Wabash Avenue to the Terre Haute Police Department headquarters for that final 1042, and then moving on to the Garrison Flag location and ultimately Calvary Cemetery. They moved at a pretty good clip. That procession went pretty quickly, Scott. Yeah,
it was a lot faster than I thought. I don't know if we ever timed it out here, but I figured 20 to 40, and I don't think it took near that long. That's some very good footage. Gave you a perspective on how the police vehicles and others were parked, and
there were hundreds of cars, as you said, that you were guesstimating about 400 law enforcement vehicles that had to get through that procession to the cemetery.
Yep, there was. That's what they had counted. Now, that doesn't mean all of them went to the cemetery,
Sure.
but that's what we had planned for that.
That's how many you
just in
counted
case.
at the
Yes.
funeral services.
Yes.
From the looks of this, it looks like they all went to the cemetery.
It seems like it. Yeah, this one could take a little bit longer, but this is pretty tough for the officers on one side. On the other side is, like I said before, so that those carnations have been to their heart, underneath, right on top of their heart, underneath their badge this whole time since 8 o'clock roughly this morning. Mm-hmm. So that piece of them now goes
with Greg.
Absolutely. So that is not a bad thing. That is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a piece of Greg now goes with all of them.
Of course. Members of the Vigo County Sheriff's Department now placing their carnation on the casket of Detective Greg Ferency. I think that's an ISU police officer.
I believe so.
This is just a live look. This is a live look of the officers walking away after they have placed their flowers. You can see Mayor Duke Bennett there in the middle. I'm guessing that they're walking away and getting back into that configuration.
They'll fall back into formation, and then they will all be brought to attention again after the OIC is done with his carnation. Brought to attention again. Then you'll hear Going Home with the bagpipers, and then as they start fading away, everybody will be dismissed.
During the funeral service, we heard touching moments from several of Detective Greg Ferency's friends. Jeff Lee, a family friend and a Terre Haute Police Department former chaplain, said it was a life well lived, even though it was just 53 years. And he said, this is a reminder to live our lives in love and to tell your loved ones often that you do love them.
Strong message, and there's a lot of days in 53 years.
Yes,
each
that's
day.
True. That is very, very true. Also at the Holman Center, Terre Haute Fire Department and volunteer firefighters were giving their time. They were used as ushers at the service. Their time is very much appreciated to help control the crowd, get people seated. State police officers now that are going in front of the casket. Detective Ferency was described during his memorial service as humble, knowledgeable, fun, funny, caring, and compassionate. Lots of great adjectives. Boy, what an honor to be described like that.
It is. It gives you a good feeling on top of it all. And then I can't get past the sketch artist thing. I really have to find out what that's all about.
I would love to see some of his sketches. Josh Pirtle, Detective Ferency's best friend, challenged all first responders to be as good as Greg. This is not a job, he says. This is a calling. All of these men and women that you see here today and those that are helping patrol our community that you do not see, this is a calling to them. And they all said to the Ferency family, thank you for sharing Greg with us. Even the owner of the Cubs calling and giving his condolences because Greg was such a big Cubs fan. Maybe they'll win a few more games after this.
Molly, who you see there, she's a survivor. She's been the family liaison. Her husband, Greg, was killed about 25 years ago. You're starting to see the end now. These are team members, and
as we have said, the officer in charge will place the final flower. There he is. Now, Scott, he just gave the final salute. Let's talk about the significance of that.
So that's on behalf of the color guard, the honor guard, all the officers you see that had partook in all of this, firing party, everybody. He's on their behalf. The last one, he started the whole thing with commands. He's ending the whole thing with commands. So right now, on top of all that, that's a cue for the bagpipers to go ahead and start their going home.